Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, October 21st. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello and welcome to the podcast this week. I had both my headphone ears on and I forgot to have the one ear off strategy. Completely took me off my game. So I apologize for that rough intro. But hey, third week in a row, we got the crew all together. Pretty important week. Lots of stuff to get into. Isn't that right, Jerry Williams?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive in. Let's get to the news.
Let's get right to the news.
I just want to say real quick, though, I can barely hear that intro music, and I just want to make sure that it's like loud enough for our listeners.
Oh, I edit that in afterward.
Oh,
what you hear is
good.
just for you.
Very good.
Yeah,
very good.
Just for you. Yes. Yeah.
I would like to announce.
What is Jeremy talking about?
I'd like to announce that I got a cold this week, and it is confirmed a cold based on how many freaking COVID tests I've taken this week to confirm that I'm not actually sick. And so I think it's nature is healing because I got a cold again, and it's purely from watching baseball. So I got rained on at a baseball game. Totally got sick. I feel like the world's returning to normal.
That was baseball.
Which game did you go to?
My kids' baseball game.
Oh, I thought you were like it's in the postseason. Did you go to Atlanta? Did you watch the Dodgers get beat by the Braves? What's going on here? Kids baseball game.
I got a notification that Kishore Hari was speaking on my Twitter, and it was like I didn't even know that Twitter had this. Like
Twitter Spaces.
Yeah.
It's a knockoff of Clubhouse. It's existed for a while. It is sparsely used. And I use it with my hockey podcast brethren to talk about games during intermissions. So we have an intermission chat. We're trying to beat out ESPN and TNT's intermission coverage with Twitter Spaces. It's going okay, actually.
Kishore really knows a lot about hockey. It turns like as much as Marvel. I don't know if like those two camps have much crossover, but he's definitely one of them. It's pretty impressive.
I'm thankful you do that podcast, Kishore, so we don't have to hear about the hockey on this one. Right, get it out of your system during that halftime. But there is a lot to talk about, and I will start with a little bit of just catch up. Actually, we were down in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area this past week. You may have seen some teases on our Tested Instagram. We did a big video shoot, which you will see the fruits of in about a month or so. Yeah. In a month or so. Super exciting, and we'll be teasing more of that. But in the LA area, if you're there, I want to shout out two things. One is the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences museum has officially opened. This is the facility close to the LACMA Museum. If you recall back, I want to say in 2015, 2016, we did a tour of the an exhibit, a costume exhibit with Adam and Deborah Nadoolman Landis, and that was a special traveling exhibit in partnership with the Royal Albert the V&A museum V&A museum over in London, but now they have a dedicated building, and they've been buying up props from things from 2001 Space Odyssey to Dorothy's Ruby Slippers, and it's a massive building dedicated to the magic of the movies. In fact, you might have seen a TV special hosted by Tom Hanks and friends on ABC promoting the museum. But if you're ever looking for a recommendation and you're in California or Los Angeles specifically, it's a place I would recommend you checking out. I haven't been yet, but we're hoping to go fairly soon. Also, if you're a Star Trek fan, this may be exciting for you. Down in the Los Angeles area, also, it's a little bit further. Los Angeles area is kind of wide. So northwest part of LA, there's the Skirball Center, and they have a traveling Star Trek exhibit. This is something that originated out of the Museum of Pop Culture up in Seattle, which previously known as the EMP. Have you been to that museum, guys? The EMP,
yes.
What used to be the EMP. It's a gorgeous building.
Love it.
It's the actual physical building is beautiful, but it's a celebration of music and science fiction, and it was one of Paul Allen's big passion projects, and housed a lot of his collection. But they have in their collection costumes, miniatures, all sorts of stuff from Star Trek. And so there's a exhibit called Exploring New Worlds, which has Kishore DS9 is in this exhibit, as well as one of the Enterprise Ds. So like we're talking about both TOS and the 90s era Star Treks.
Wait, when you say DS9 is there, you don't mean the show is represented. You mean they have like the space station model there?
They have the space station model.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are a few like things that are reproductions. I'm not sure if the DS9 is a reproduction or the filming model, but they have a representation of DS9 there, as well as your standard uniforms, phasers, tricorders, tribbles, and the like. But that's, I don't know if that's going anywhere else. This might have, I want to say it's the last stop of that exhibit that has been traveling since 2016, but it's now in the Skirball Cultural Center down in LA. So
that's
I wish they would let you. Can you crawl inside the Jeffries tube that they have? Because that's always been like a desire of mine.
I feel like you would need knee pads for that. Those do not look comfortable at all. The kind of like lycra pants they had in Next Generation. You look at the grading on the Jeffries tubes, like that's going to be really bad on your knees.
You don't crawl in a Jeffries tube recreationally. So, if you're going in there, you don't need knee pads. You go in there to save a life.
Or meet the Borg.
I think you missed a number of romantic subplots that involve crawling through Jeffries tubes.
You got to have, your robots. You got to bring a Ruskin flute there. Yeah, it's the only private place, really, in the bowels of the ship. It would be a cool thing to have a Star Trek escape room, Star Trek themed escape room, in which a Jeffries tube was a factor, because we've done plenty of these escape rooms where you have to like crawl through tight spaces, and that would be, I think, very appropriate. Anyway, those are two shout outs, museums and exhibits in the LA area. But we're going to roll right into some pop culture. We had the premiere of The Eternals also in LA this past week. So some of the first social media reactions are there. Now, I would warn people to stay off the Eternals hashtag or some of those reviews, because one of the critics leaked the end credit sequence, the post credit sequence. It wasn't just hyping what, it actually named characters and named things that happened, and characters' names were even trending. So if you want to stay spoiler free, stay off of that hashtag on social media. But all the early word says that it's great. It's wide in scope. It looks like a Chloe Zhao film. So beautiful vistas, sunsets, and the way they juggle the ensemble of characters, because there's a lot of new characters. Apparently, it's very well handled. So very excited for that. I believe that comes out early November. Have you guys watched movies in theaters recently? Have you guys seen the ones the exclusive movies in theaters? Are either of you going to plan on watching Dune in theaters when it comes out later this week?
I saw Space Jam: A New Legacy in the theater because we rented one. Because it's very important film.
Yeah,
You'll recall from this summer had an Xbox game tie-in that made national news or international news and was very highly regarded. That is the only film I have seen in the theater. I am considering watching Dune because I love the director's work. And then there's the Paul Thomas Anderson film coming out later this year that also is intriguing. But I have yet to make good on either one of those promises, obviously.
Yeah, I saw Shang-Chi, and I don't like. I'm worried about Dune. I think that's my best way of putting it. Like, I love Denis Villeneuve. All the imagery from the trailer looks great. I just have this kind of special place in my heart for Dune. As I saw somebody put it, like, Dune is an amazing book that you read, and then you go online to actually figure out what happened in the book. And I don't want that experience of Dune to be ruined. And there's that 83 movie. That's right. So weird. And it's such a cult classic. I don't know how a mainstream movie can live up to the kind of bizarreness of that. And so I'm worried about it. Is the best way of making it.
My guess is it doesn't have to. And I mean, you look at Blade Runner, it couldn't be a closer analog, and it's the exact same director. So I mean, I think that in any case, if you're making a movie that's a remake of a classic, you still have to appeal to people who haven't seen it before. That's got to be actually your first priority.
Which Blade Runner didn't. It famously was not a success. It was a huge critical success for critics and fans, but for a mainstream audience who did not care or didn't watch the original Blade Runner, or had no big connection. Even Ryan Gosling couldn't pull them into the story, or Harrison Ford couldn't pull them into a story because it was so directly tied to the legacy and the story and the characters of the first Blade Runner, and which is why we're very thankful that movie exists, right? That it wasn't just a hard reboot and taking the name. It actually was meaningful for Deckard and those characters. I have seen Dune.
What?
I did see it in theaters.
Wow.
I'm sorry to bury the lead.
Is it 3 hours long? How long is it?
It is close to 3 hours long. Thankfully, there were no trailers. I went to a press screening, and Denis Villeneuve was there to do a Q&A afterward. But I will tell you, I'm ashamed for this. I had to leave before the Q&A to pick up my kid from daycare.
Okay.
Because the movie was so long. So I had to after the credit sequence, quietly walk out of the Dolby Cinema of the theater in the prime middle seat positions. I had to step over people. And then as I exited the Dolby Cinema, Denis Villeneuve was out there taking photos with the big poster. And I just clapped and said, thank you. And then had to scurry out as if I was going to the bathroom, but then went to my car. I will say it's tougher to spoil a movie like Dune, because people, it's based on the book. Right. So I'm not going to go into the interpretations or anything. I'll say that it feels very much like a Denis Villeneuve movie. If you liked his aesthetic from Blade Runner, if you like his aesthetic from Arrival, has a lot of those, its scale of the world building feels massive. I think they handle the palace intrigue really well in a way that feels straightforward. So it's not as convoluted because they're introducing different, houses, like they're all futuristic humans, right? But like the Harkonnen and the Fremen and all this stuff. But all of the parties are introduced in a way so it feels, if you can watch Game of Thrones and juggle all the Game of Thrones families in your head, Dune is like a cakewalk. It's like you just got to know 3 parties. You just got to know House Atreides, the Harkonnen, and the Fremen, and that's it. And the one thing I'll say is that it is a part 1. I don't know if people know this going in, but this movie was filmed and written to be the first half of the book Dune. So I won't say which part of the book it ends, but it was made with the intention that there will be a second half, and it needs that second half. This movie, while it does conclude, it ends at some point, it is not conclusive of the story. And it would be really, really disappointing and sad if the sequel, the second half of the story was never told.
Sounds like you give it a thumbs up.
I give it a massive thumbs up. It's a movie that I think Denis Villeneuve's movies always kind of stick with you at the end. There's always a little bit of like a gut punch or some emotional resonance. And even for a story that's as well known among science fiction fans as Dune, he tells it in a way that does leave you with that gut punch in the end. Jeremy, who just stepped away for a second, I wanted to also call one thing out. I don't know if he saw my tweet about this. I'm gonna wait. Come on, Jeremy, get back here.
Yep.
The one last thing I'll say about Dune, and I'm only gonna call out to you because you're someone who will appreciate this. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with the plot, but has to do with the props of the film. In one scene, they're flying they're in a vehicle, we'll say, right? A well-known vehicle in the Dune universe. And the pilot is Duke Atreides, played by Oscar Isaac. And what he's wearing is, some futuristic headgear. And that headgear is a modified HTC Vive Deluxe audio head strap.
Wait a minute. Did you see this in a trailer or something? I remember hearing about this.
I saw it in the movie. I tweeted it. Wow. After watching the movie. It's the one thing that took me out of the film.
That's hilarious.
It's actually in the trailer. You see the front shot of it, but in the movie you see the back of it and the contour of that head strap. I said, I know what that is, from the knob to the ear things, the speakers.
Yeah.
They're modified, but it's not connected to anything. But you know how the front of the deluxe audio head strap contours like a circle, and that's where people zip tied their Oculuses, right, for their Frankenquest. It's clearly there. And he just had the back deluxe audio head strap attached to a head as if it's some type of flying gear.
I've got mine sitting right over here. That must be a taste of what it's like to be Adam or anyone who is professionally kit bashed.
Yes.
To go to a movie and just like pick them all apart.
Yeah, just to recognize, did the Leo DiCaprio Once Upon a Time in Hollywood thing. And for that moment, I said, this takes me out of the film just a little bit. Okay, moving on to some more pop culture news. There have been some delays in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think all of Marvel's slate of the entire films next year and beyond were pushed back a couple months. I don't think it's incredibly noteworthy.
Shrug.
At the Eternals premiere, they said it just gives them more time to get things right, but I think it's kind of indicative of where they see the theater going landscape. They're giving theaters more time to recover, and in the States here, more time for people to feel comfortable to going into theaters. So makes sense. We'll have to wait a little longer for Doctor Strange 2 and all the subsequent films. Black Panther, I think, got pushed to even the year following. Also, RIP to Why the Last Man, the TV show. This is noteworthy because this is a comic book adaptation that comic book fans had wanted for a decade now, that in development. They finally was on Hulu. Big budget, big amount of world building. This giant mystery show. Again, a cult favorite among comic book fans. And then after the first season, no one watched it. It's one of those. It's a victim to the golden era of too much TV, too much good TV.
I was hyped about the show and it was on my list and I never got around to it. Our friend Charlie Jane Anders was a writer on this show. It is an exceptional comic book, and I'm bummed that it didn't get enough promotion, to be honest, because it didn't really come up. I think the murder show with Steve Martin and Martin Short has gotten much more promotion on Hulu than this show, and I'm sad about it, but I'm definitely going to try to check out the season, even though it's going to be its only run.
I think it speaks to how there's so much good prestige television on all the premium channels and subscription services, that these big bets that networks have to make, or they decide to make, if no matter how much money or how much potential a show has, they can't predict what's going to resonate and go viral and be the water cooler conversation show. Apple put a ton of money in Foundation, and I don't know if people are watching Foundation, even though, once again, it's a show that it's based on a beloved book series, Isaac Asimov book series, thought unfilmable, and this is supposed to be their big blowout science fiction show after For All Mankind, and all people can talk about are Squid Game. It's Squid Game on Netflix. Technically a syndicated, imported show that for Netflix's value has given them like $1 billion worth of marketing value because of how popular it's going to be. Their most popular show of all time, right? Not just a foreign language show. So it just speaks to we are spoiled for content, and yet it feels like there's too much to watch all the time, and people just want to catch in the moment and only have so much to watch. Things are going to fall through the cracks, and Why the Last Man, unfortunately, one of them. DC had their big Fandome event, their version of an online Comic-Con. This is the trend of studios moving away from being at actual conventions and doing their own virtual things where they can do a 3-hour live stream and reach so many more people. And we had a ton of footage and content to go from this. Shall we start with the Batman trailer, the second full trailer for the Batman? Did you guys watch this?
I did. Yep. It's not as good as the first trailer. The mood isn't as persistent, but there's some stunning visuals. You get some more of the vibe that Matt Reeves is going for, and I think you get a real sense of how this will play as kind of a modern horror film.
Yeah, I remember thinking when I saw the first trailer, which came out a while ago, right?
Yeah, the film's supposed to be out by now.
It was delayed by COVID and all sorts of other things.
I remember thinking, wow, they've gone dark. Like Batman is not a good guy, like through and through. And this was a little lighter on that, but you could still see it. And I'm just curious if the world wants that right now, given COVID, and who knows? It's dark has been very popular over the past decade, so we'll see. But yeah, I do like seeing that they keep reinventing Batman. And I get the impression that they did that in the comics as well. That every few years you'd get some crazy new take on what Batman's personality is. But I like that we're seeing that through my lifetime. Batman has been reinvented like 4 times now.
Yeah, and unlike the Marvel characters where continuity becomes so important, and the studio tries to reconcile all the different versions of the characters, which may be what they're doing with Spider-Man. With DC, they're happy to have 3 different Batman on screen at once, and in the animated series, which they're bringing back. There's going to be the Robert Pattinson Batman in the Batman Younger origin story, very reminiscent of it looks like a Mindhunter, like a David Fincher joint, dark in a way that's different, not just visually but tonally compared to the Christopher Nolan ones. His hot rod looks awesome. Catwoman looks great. Colin Farrell as a Penguin is completely unrecognizable, and the main question is, well, will this also be a detective story? The promise that Matt Reeves made was that this was going to be about the world's greatest detective, not just about a vigilante beating thugs up to a pulp. So that remains to be seen. But speaking of Batman, we also had a second Batman appearance at DC Fandome, live action in The Flash. The Flash trailer, Flashpoint. Did you see, this was not really a trailer. It's kind of a little bit of a teaser in production, but Ezra Miller comes back.
Got shots from the movie, so I mean, it was somewhere in between, because it was not polished by any ways.
Yeah. Did you watch this? Because this was so confusing. I can imagine this being incredibly confusing to people who don't follow DC and the DC universe.
The short take is they seem to be merging a couple storylines that are famous in Flash canon. There is the Flashpoint Paradox, which I think is or Flashpoint as it's more commonly referred to, where Flash basically goes back in time and changes events that has consequences on the future. I think we see an element of that. And then I'm forgetting the exact name of it, but it's like there's basically a different storyline that where Flash crosses universes, very similar kind of thing. And we see multiple Flashes, Flash I, Flash E, I don't know, Flashes, I'm just going to call them. And they have very different aesthetics, and Ezra Miller plays all of them. And it's sort of intriguing. And in that, a universe traversing story, we see a Batman.
So, Jeremy, I gotta put this to you, because I presume you don't follow it as closely. What you know of the Flash is that he's fast.
Safe presumption, Norm.
Yep. Like, did you know Flash can time travel?
Did anybody until he did? Come on. I mean, this is somebody writing a comic book decided he could time travel. No, I didn't know that.
And I would imagine even for people who saw Justice League in the theaters, not the Zack Snyder's Justice League, but the Joss Whedon version, that time travel was not a big part. You had to see the Snyder cut to see the big time travel plot point in that.
Oh, I don't even remember that.
I
remember him slowing down time, but I don't remember.
It goes backwards. Like Darkseid wins, and then he runs so fast that it kind of reconstitutes. It's kind of like in Superman 1. So they're taking that plot point, that characteristic of the Flash, which was only really shown to audiences, mainstream audiences, in the Snyder cut, or I guess if you watch the Flash TV show. So there's a CW Flash TV show which the Ezra Miller Flash has appeared in a surprise cameo to show the multiverse, to show multiple versions of the Flash. So you kind of have to also know that that's a thing that can happen, that the jump between realities, as Kishore mentioned, the DC multiverse. But like this teaser, if you watch this in a theater and if you are unfamiliar with the comic book version of the Flash and you'd only seen maybe Justice League, it would make no sense to you, because there's a glimpse of a Batman that you see the back of his head, you see the horns of his cowl, and you don't know who it is. Jeremy, do you know who that is?
Well, I'm watching the trailer right now, and I watched it all the way through. I didn't see Batman. Oh, now I see him. There he is.
Yeah. The voiceover throughout that trailer is that Batman.
Oh, wow.
Because it's Michael Keaton.
Shut up. It is? Are you?
Yes.
What?
It's Michael Keaton. You see the stinger where he's about to pull the cloth over that vehicle? That's the 1989 Batmobile.
Oh my God. This is amazing. No, this is great. I'll see this movie. Absolutely.
They didn't give the one thing that would have gotten someone like you, Jeremy, interested based on your reaction. They teased it maybe a little bit too much of a tease when it becomes the premise of the entire film. Is, like Kishore said, the Flash changes something in the past, alters reality, jumps realities, and he enters into the reality where it's the 1989 Batman universe and meets Batman.
Holy cow.
Via Michael Keaton.
And Tim Burton is not associated with this at all.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
Intriguing.
And not only that, but the Ben Affleck Batman also in this film.
Oh, that's too bad.
I mean, that's Ezra Miller's Batman. So he's a fine Batman. So there are going to be 3 Batmen in DC movies between Robert Pattinson, Ben Affleck, and Michael Keaton returning. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I think that's amazing. Okay, something a little more straightforward. There are also 2 franchises, the Shazam side of the DC universe and Black Adam. So there are footage from The Rock as Black Adam in his standalone film. Kind of weird that that's going to be separate from Shazam, because Shazam 2 has a different cast of villains, and they're going to join up and meet up at some point. But both those films look super fun.
I thought the Black Adam footage, we didn't get, excuse me, we didn't get much, but I thought it looked like Black Adam looked imposing, as we kind of hoped for. We didn't really get much zoomed in on Black Adam to really see like the Rock's face, as it were. So I remain excited about that. Shazam, I think, hasn't aged as well for me as some of the other DC movies. I really liked it when it came out. I watched it again recently, and the charm had worn off on me.
Yeah,
I still like the film.
I gather Black Adam is a bad guy.
Definitely an anti-hero. His powers come from the same source, Shazam the Wizard. Oh. So he was alluded to in the first Shazam film. He has the big lightning bolt, but he's from a much older time. So he's a Egyptian, and it's not just going to be Black Adam. There's going to be the whole a lot of DC characters, from Dr. Fate to Hawkman, Hawkgirl, a lot of these kind of mystical characters brought into that world. But The Rock has been fan casted as Black Adam. He's wanted to make this film for over 10 years, and finally he's suited up, and head is appropriately shaved, and I don't know if we get this pointy ears in this, but he's a fan favorite character, and The Rock is the biggest movie star in the world, so DC hopes that this will do well.
Yep.
There's a lot more stuff in the DC Fandome, but I will say one last thing. What did you think, Kishore, of the footage of the Bruce Timm reboot of the animated series?
The best thing DC has put out has been their animated work, like bar none. We can quibble about like different points. Bruce Timm is probably responsible for some of the best of that work, including Batman the Animated Series. This felt like a return to kind of the gothic roots of that series in a lot of ways. I remain really excited. I've heard some criticism of the Batman design, the costume design being sort of like angular and cartoony. Well, it's a cartoon, so there you go.
Dang.
It's called Cape Crusader. It's not exactly the animated series. It's again a reimagining. So a lot of Bruce Timm animated style. And interestingly, this one is also co-produced by J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams dipping his toes into the Batman animated world. So I don't know exactly what he's going to bring to it, but he had a video talking about how much the show meant to him and how seriously he takes his character. So hopefully it will be good. So that does it for the pop culture part of the segment. Let's go to some tech news. We'll start with some handheld stuff. There has been a lot of SteamDeck news lately, but Valve did announce this past week that they have a new program that they're working with developers for a verification system. They're going to give games the check mark, this time a green check mark if their games are SteamDeck verified. Jeremy, did you read about this?
Yeah. Did they allude to this when you saw it in person? No.
All they had done was said, one, they had made the proclamation all, if not most, games on Steam would work on SteamDeck because it's a PC. But they had talked about sending developer kits out to developers for compatibility purposes. And one of my big concerns was yes, you can get a game with the right settings to run at 30 FPS baseline, but games designed for PC sometimes require keyboard mouse. What about cursor input or keyboard input for typing a name into an RPG character, or all the boot stuff, right? It's not just about the compatibility with Proton, but also anti-cheat and other services you may sign in, like Origin or whatever Ubisoft calls Uplay now. Like, how is that going to make this handheld console a seamless one button Wii, not a Wii, a Switch-like experience of pressing a game and launching it? And this is their answer.
Yeah, I think it's really smart because it has been a concern that people have had, I think raised rightly so, that, obviously even on Steam, when you were doing big picture mode, you would have games that had like the gamepad icon that were 100%, compatible and easy to use with the old Steam controller. I think this makes a lot of sense. And I'll be curious to see how many verified games there are at launch. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not many. Like, honestly, given the scope of what's on Steam, which is practically infinite, I would imagine that they have to pick and choose the games that get this symbol because they're the ones that are going to exemplify the best experience on the device. And so going out the gate, they're going to have to be careful about which ones get that symbol.
And they're doing it as an internal verification process. It's not relying on, they'll give the developers the APIs and the tools so developers can incorporate, and units, of course, hardware, so developers can incorporate APIs that say, hey, this game is now playing on a Steam Deck. Let me change the default graphics settings to have it run well, or change the input so you can use you don't need to use a touchscreen or something.
I get the impression that it's less about performance and frame rates than it is about input.
It is. I think you're right. And where they draw that line, I think, is the most interesting thing, because the tier below verified is playable. And I think a lot of the hardcore gamers are like, well, the playable thing should be verified, because for Valve, if a game requires like keyboard input for typing a name in, it won't be verified. It'll just be considered playable. And for hardcore PC gamers, like, wait, that's totally fine. I don't mind typing in something or plugging a Bluetooth mouse. But it shows you that Valve wants that the verified tag to really exemplify a plug and play console-like experience, that the bar is going to be really high, and they're going to be putting money behind internal reviews and ongoing reviews if games are patched and performance takes a hit, or if anti-cheat is evolving. The games are services now, right? PC games especially, they have to continually update that verification. So it's peace of mind, not necessarily for you or me, Jeremy, but they think a broader audience of people who are maybe more casual, for whom this may be their first gaming PC, really.
I think it's smart, honestly, because that is going to matter to people. Like, it could be that it's not clear how to pull up the in-app keyboard and how to use it. Who knows? There's not going to be a majority of people that use it as a PC with a keyboard and mouse hooked up to it. It's going to have to exist by itself. Yeah. And what they have going for them is that so many more games every year, it feels like, are cross-platform PC and console. And so they've got sort of console gamepad functionality baked in already. So all of those games that are, ports from the console or cross-platform and have console support, they're going to have that gamepad icon in Steam Big Screen. They're going to be verified here as well, as long as, as you mentioned before, like the performance isn't below their min spec.
I feel like they want someone who clicks on it or buys from their opinion, right? That's what they want. They want people to buy games on Steam, buys a game that's verified for Steam Deck to not have to ever launch Steam Input, where the on-screen mapping is the default mapping will work fine and never have to go reconfigure the input if they don't want to. Not that you can't, of course. And I think this speaks to their belief that Steam Deck is eventually, maybe not necessarily at launch, going to be a mass market console, that they've aggressively priced it and the performance is there, and in their roadmap of the hardware that they want to develop, this can be competitive with someone looking to spend $400, $500 on a handheld or a game console.
I wonder, what this makes me think about is I wonder about exclusivity to the consoles, because a lot of people who make, or I guess it's generally the console manufacturers who are, it's only the console manufacturers who are funding exclusives for their platform. They often will make an exclusive for the PlayStation or the Xbox or this, not Nintendo. Okay, so PlayStation, Xbox, and then they will say, "Oh, and we can also make a PC version." Right? That's something different. Like that's not even competing with us. So I wonder at one point, like if the Steam Deck were to take off as a platform, it would be considered, competition. And the platform owners, wouldn't allow a PC build to be released day and date with their console exclusive.
That's a really good question. Deathloop comes to mind recently because that was a PlayStation exclusive. But again, it was day and date with PC, but they still called it a PlayStation exclusive. It wasn't like what was the Kojima game where Death Stranding, where it came on PC, ported it later. It was day and date. But this, if you have a Steam Deck, you could play it on your big TV. You're right, absolutely right. What does that mean? I think console makers and publishers will not care as much because they'll think Steam Deck is such a small segment.
It will be
the friction to launch a game. But again, this is where Valve believes that they can reduce that friction enough where it can be competitive.
Yeah,
and you buy a one-stop shop and plug in your PlayStation Bluetooth controller, and you can play the exact same game in good performance. Maybe at 1080p on a big TV. Yeah. Have either of you looked into the handheld analog or heard about it? This is the FPGA-based console that plays classic games, cartridges.
Yeah,
well.
I wasn't aware of any updates on it.
Well, the hardware's been delayed because of supply issues, right? As with all big hardware, so they were promising it, out by now. I think it's still hopefully by the end of this year. It's a beautiful looking handheld. It's supposed to, it looks very much like a sleek, glossy black Game Boy Pocket, and it does play cartridges. And the big selling point is that it's not software emulation. It is FPGA architecture, so it runs extremely well, low latency. It basically runs the code on a board level. But they started showing the OS to it, their Analog OS, and they have a whole Twitter thread. If you look at Analog, this is Analog, LOGUE is their Twitter handle, and they think they're going to have the definitive classic games catalog OS, essentially the Plex of classic gaming, where you have metadata and box art and customization for how to render games, and I think Plex, how robust Plex is for movies and media, is how they would consider this for classic handheld games.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, FPGA in general it's like really, really well respected at my office, where where people care about digital. Classic games and that old technology, to the extent that emulation is kind of frowned upon because it introduces errors and latency and issues that, aren't respectful of the original experience. And people love this. People love the analog series of consoles, although they admit that they're expensive. Like they do provide what people generally feel is missing from traditional emulation. And I know people are excited about this handheld device. I use the Mister, and I guess this isn't quite as powerful as the Mister, but it's cool to see, what is possible in a handheld form factor. I'm looking forward to seeing how it feels. I bet it's going to feel great, but we'll see.
So many consoles coming out, handheld consoles coming out this end of this year. There's the Playdate, the Analog, and the Steam Deck. It's going to be a great time to play on the couch, the bedroom, or the toilet.
True that.
All right. Speaking of other mobile devices, two big events. One from Google. Kishore, give us the lowdown on the Pixel 6 event, please.
Is this the moment for the Pixel? Like, Google wants you to actually believe this is the biggest deal because we have their system on a chip. It's an ARM-based system on a chip that you're calling Tensor that has a lot of AI built into it. We talked about this when at I/O, and this whole new architecture they claim is going to have really big performance benefits because they have multiple cores. Like, they have 2 high-end cores, like I think it's 4 middle cores and a couple low cores that can manage power more efficiently on everyday things that you do. So like most Android devices tend to manage their power, spin up like as many cores as possible to deal with whatever you're doing at that moment, and then get back to low power mode as fast as possible. This is designed to actually be a little bit more responsive to what you're doing. They debuted some features. We haven't gotten a look at the software. Like, the reviewers have only gotten a look at the hardware, and they're not allowed to say anything about the software or the photos yet, which
That's
is
a good
weird. But what they claim they were able to do is a lot on the photo side. So there's new camera specs. They have a new sensor for the first time in a while, and the camera specs are equivalent to what we see on like the iPhone 13. What they say they can do with some of this AI processing power is now, like, when you take a photo, they can remove background elements. If there's someone in the background of your photo, they will just pull them out, gone.
And replace it with whatever they'll just presume should be back there.
Yeah, the promo shot they showed this working on has a fairly consistent background color. Like, they're almost like on a tennis court, and there's like the legs of somebody walking in the background. So take that. That's not high-end photoshopping skills to take like somebody out that's on a consistent background. They're also doing a lot with like motion faces in motion, either smoothing out somebody that's moving, like a kid that's running, so that you actually get the actual photo, or actually blurring background things that are in motion. And they showed a picture of a couple in front of a Ferris wheel as an example of that. We have to see if like some of this stuff actually comes to pass. So they have a basic Pixel and a Pixel Pro. The Pixel comes with a 90 hertz refresh rate. The Pixel Pro has a 120, and it has a third camera like everything else. The big difference is the pricing is aggressively middleware. Like, they're trying to create like a middle tier of pricing. It's not cheap, but it's not high end. It's not over $1,000.
They're bringing phones back to $600.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the big story here. They think their flagship phone for $600 is a slap in the face to the Samsungs and the Apples of the world who want to make money on hardware, because Google wants to make money on software and services.
Yeah, so I think until we see reviews of the software and all the other pieces, I would not call this a flagship phone. From what I can tell, there's been some complaints. So the edge of the phone is rounded. And reviewers have already noted that rounding casts a shadow on the edge of the screen, like something you don't get on like a Samsung 21 or an iPhone. So like, I think we should like hold off on calling it a flagship phone until we see this in the real world. But it's close. And if we're talking about a phone that can do most of my everyday tasks, take really good photos, I think this is going to be in the conversation for sure. It's not as good as the iPhone 13, and it's certainly not the Pro, and certainly not the S21. But it's like $500 cheaper than those phones.
Yeah. And for folks who are interested in the Pixel 6, one thing that might be really enticing is the new Pixel Pass. So they're going all in on a subscription service. I mean, if you're just mired in the Apple world, this looks extremely appealing from a price perspective. $45 a month, which I know sounds like a lot, but that gets you a Pixel 6 with an upgrade in 2 years, extended warranty, 200 gigabytes of Google One storage, Play Pass, YouTube Premium, and YouTube Music Premium for $45 a month. Like, if you're already paying for the YouTube Premium and the Google Play and the Google One storage, it basically is like a phone for $25 a month, and their flagship phone.
You know what actually is the most enticing thing is the Google One thing here, because I think the majority of people I know that work use Google Drive for storage, or Dropbox. They aren't really using iCloud for their like normal file storage and sharing. So to get 200 gigs of storage, especially now that photos aren't free in the same way they previously were in terms of storage, is like a big deal. The YouTube Music Premium feels like a nice add-on. I don't really know what the reviews are on their repair program. This is relatively new, so that like we have to see what that upgrade program and the repair program, how it functions. Like, they don't have stores like Apple does for all of that. But I agree. I do think this is like an interesting point, and they're including the Pixel Buds in with a pre-order purchase. So they are really making the ecosystem play, and I think this is just the beginning, because this whole phone is about the AI software. So they're about to tie everything into the software services of Google. Finally, frankly, like, I think that's the word that I'm looking for here. Finally. I'm going to reserve judgment until we hear more about the software and see the photos from the reviewers.
Yeah. And one last thing before we switch over to Apple, on the Android side, if you install Windows 11, and quick check, Jeremy, Kishore, either of you install Windows 11 yet?
No, I have to go in my BIOS and enable that stupid thing.
And Jeremy has no interest still.
No, not yet. No, nothing's worth it for me yet. Waiting for something to tell me that, oh, that's cool, I gotta spend an hour doing it.
Well, this probably won't be it for you, but for Windows 11 beta users, they get access to finally Android apps, 50 of them to start. So an insider preview will let you access to some basic Android apps, from the Kindle app to a Lego Duplo world, and more to come. But it's the windowed Android experience inside Windows 11. So that's a feature that people, I guess, have been anticipating, but slow coming.
Besides, Netflix hasn't released Seinfeld in 4x3 yet. So
that's right.
So I can't possibly install Windows 11.
That's right. I got to wait for those things to match up. Okay, Apple event. It was what everyone expected. No big surprises. Or were there big surprises? Jeremy, what did you think? Let's talk about this MacBook Pro.
Wait, isn't it 2015 again? Like, with all the ports coming back?
Come on, Kishore. We're 2 days too late on the snark. But Jeremy, what as someone who may be in the target demographic for this MacBook, what did you think?
Yeah, I got the first MacBook Pro that had the touch bar, and I'm still happy with it. I have no need to upgrade. So I watched a little bit of the presentation, but I was, I don't know. This isn't. It looks amazing. Like that top tier MacBook Pro, like that looks insane. It's also insanely expensive, but it's supposed to have like GTX 3080
2080 desktop 2080 capacity.
Is that right? Because I read 30, but it looks powerful. And if I was doing productivity, if I was doing video editing, I would be all about this, because this looks great. This looks like a nice laptop, a really nice laptop. And I'm glad to see that they're exploring what can be done on this M1 chip that doesn't require going to an M2 category yet. It's I honestly like I expected that we might see that by now, and we haven't.
I have a touch bar. I have a touch bar. Yeah. I still have a touch bar MacBook Pro. I hate it. And so like the pieces of this that I really like, the keyboard looks great. And I still have like whatever the butterfly keys, and that's like, it sucks. And so this is a big upgrade from that. And the M1 is the other, attractive piece. Now, is it worth me giving my last kidney for, which is how much this thing costs? Probably not. But going forward, if or when I'm ready for a new MacBook, God, this is so much better than what was offered before. Having HDMI integrated, even though I think it's 2.0 and not 2.1, which is a weird choice.
Yeah,
MagSafe
they limited the ports,
rest of
didn't
the
they?
stuff. Yeah.
Like HDMI and also SD card. I don't know if that bus is 3.0 speeds. I don't know if they're
Yeah.
going to be. It
Huh.
might just be like, because the controller. I don't know which controllers they're using. These are things I looked at in the Apple specs, and they did not specify SDHC capacity. Yes, but I don't know if they're going to. I think they still really want people to use USB-C for I/O, and this is just like okay, we threw it in there, full size HDMI for presentations, but not for media playback. And certainly, yeah, the bandwidth isn't really there for for VR, for example, but for HDMI. But the big story is, of course, the redesign of these laptops. Now the ProMotion screens, they're up to 120 hertz, 14 and 16-inch model, and both laptops, both sizes, have options for either of the chips, the M1 Pro or the M1 Max, in various GPU configurations. So it's going to be confusing, I think. I mean, maybe the pro users, the quote-unquote prosumer users who want to spend $5,000 on a laptop will have no problem parsing through the differences in the architectures and the GPU cores. But the promise of M1 last year was one M1 chip, like on the iOS side, was enough for MacBook Air and MacBook Pro 13-inch. And maybe the only difference was RAM or a few unlocked cores. Here, there's like an actual range of different configurations, and even within M1 Pro and within M1 Max. None of this really matters until we see what performance is like on the test units. And I've got to believe Apple's optimized for their native apps, the Final Cuts and the Pro Logics. They want to sell expensive software for video editors and audio editors. And people who've used Adobe suite of applications on the M1 chips have been very happy with that. So I bet that's going to work well also. It's still a very expensive computer for people who want to have their primary computer be a laptop, and that's where I can't get on board on this. Like, I feel like I want my primary computer to be a desktop, whether it's Windows or Mac OS. I like that massive monitor, a big GPU, lots of storage that I can add in and out, and RAM. I want that experience. You're kind of locked in to this laptop form factor with whichever configuration you choose at this high price for years.
Yep.
I thought this was making the argument of just like, this can be your computer, hook it up to a monitor when you're at your desk, a monitor and keyboard when you're at your desk, take it with you as you go. You have one computer, period. Now,
I think Norm's saying you can't upgrade it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
you can't upgrade it.
You're locked in. That's laptop existence,
right? And they're betting that laptop existence is the path going forward. But I'm
not sure they're wrong about that.
It really depends. I mean, you're still locked into the TDP, and I understand that the M1 chips are really efficient with their tiny nanometer process. But I want the compute of a desktop experience. Maybe I'm limited by Windows OS. Maybe I'm limited by a not ARM based architecture. But for games and even for productivity, I want to be able to pull 300 watts on my GPU.
What does Apple offer in terms of PC cases at this point in time?
I mean, the iMac essentially is going to be this.
Oh,
but
yeah. No, that doesn't count.
Screen.
No,
right?
I mean like the old honking cases. Do they not sell the cylindrical one or the?
They had an updated
anymore?
version, right? They did it. They I don't the Mac Pro.
Right.
Yeah, their Mac Pro. What does the Mac Pro look like right now? I think they brought back a cheese grater form factor.
That's it.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's not on M1. I think that's still on an Intel configuration.
It starts at $6,000.
Right. Exactly.
And you're right. Yeah, it has starts at a 12 core, or no, it starts at an 8 core, 3.5 gigahertz Intel Xeon.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no sweet spot for someone who's kind of like the classic PC gamer. who maybe wants to spend $2,000. Like, right. These are for people who want to spend $2,000 to maybe $3,000 on a computer, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But maybe doesn't care as much about portability, but wants gaming and productivity and expandability and something future proof. I think about all those people who bought an Intel-based 16-inch MacBook Pro 2 to 3 years ago. Let's say 3 years ago, and spent $3,000 on that system. Woefully outdated at this point.
Do you think AirPods 3s are going to sell well?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. AirPods seem like their most successful product in the last 10 years at this point.
It's just like it's a new category because it doesn't seem like they're dropping the AirPod 2s. So you got like the AirPod 2s, and then you got the 3s, and then you got the Pros. So they kind of slid it in there. I wonder what you guys thought.
It tells me that because they didn't have to announce the AirPod Pro 2s, that they can the slow playing of the releases tells me how successful that category is, that they're in no rush. They're selling so well that they can just make AirPod 2s in a slightly bigger form factor or slightly different form factor, curved form factor, and make it more waterproof, whatever, some wireless inductive charging. And people are going to gobble that up because it's the new thing, that they're in no rush to really put in noise cancellation in AirPods. And it gives spaces for places like Google with their Pixel Buds and Samsung with their Buds and all these other audio companies room to catch up. But Apple just has the brand, AirPods are a fashion accessory. They have that brand recognition.
I'm very curious how spatial audio actually functions on there. I think the AirPods' best feature is the pass-through audio, where it kind of quiets so you can actually hear the environment. And I'm curious how spatial audio will interact in that. But really, the selling point here is the longer battery life. I don't know about these force sensor controls, like how many people are actually going to reach up and touch the stick and hold it in order to get it.
Well, that's what it is currently on the Pro. So
do you hold them though?
In different cases. So there's a single tap to play and pause. There's double tap to skip, and there's hold to turn on noise cancellation or toggle.
Yeah, and presumably this will be appealing for people who want to pay that $5 a month new voice music plan, which is peculiar. I know Amazon has something equivalent for their Alexa devices, but this is a music subscription plan where you cannot type in the name of an artist and browse on any type of screen, an album or song. It is voice, meaning Siri, activated only for $5 a month.
I think this is fascinating. This is fascinating to me. First of all, I'm a huge fan of music subscription, despite what it's done to artists' revenue. As a music consumer, I love it, and I can't imagine not having Apple Music in my life right now. It would have to be Spotify or something else. But so I'm a fan of this product. And I use it I access it through voice a lot. But it's interesting to me that they would treat voice only as a pain point because they love Siri. They have done so much to make us feel like Siri, we should replace our, Echo devices with Siri devices. And they've developed Siri over the years so much that they would say that you can only have Siri and you will feel the pain of that and want to upgrade later, which is presumably what they're thinking. You'd want to upgrade to the personal plan and double, what you're paying to $10 so you can access it and create playlist or, save playlists and access the library via touch or via typing is interesting. I just think that's fascinating. And I wonder how painful that will be, or if it won't be for some people.
I think in the long run for those people, it probably is a great deal because the target audience is people who are using music via Siri only anyways. And the pain point isn't so much, it's not so much that they see that voice access as a pain point, is that they see it as a harder sell. Because by selling something that they think is compelling, but they trust in Siri and they believe strongly in it, you're also having to market an omission. People are going to be asking, why not? Why don't I get the text input? Mm-hmm. And so that trust in Siri is still, they're insecure, I guess, about the trust in Siri. They feel strongly about it, but they're insecure about the public perception. But maybe over time, that's how they're going to get people to actually believe that voice is all you need. But it's like the reverse Google foo. I hate the idea of needing voice foo to choose to find a thing that, and how would like Shazam, like what if I just want to search by lyrics or search by something like that? Doesn't work well with voice only.
I've had good luck with that. Play the song that goes, and then you give the lyrics, and it will play the song. But you're right; it's a certain kind of Siri foo. It's like you have to learn how to engage with a computer in its lexicon.
Yeah.
And if people who are good at that will enjoy this, other people, it's gonna be painful. But like you said, it is a good deal, and I'm surprised. I don't know. I never understood how they came up with pricing for music subscription services, and it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of margin at $5.
Certainly not for the artists.
Right? Yeah. Sadly, that's certainly true. But you would presume it's the same margin for the artist, depending on number of plays. So yeah. I wonder if they just assume people will be playing less music if they have voice only,
or only certain like less broad catalog of music. You're not discovering stuff maybe necessarily.
So.
We didn't talk about the notch on the MacBooks because I don't think it's actually something really worth talking about, except that there's no Face ID in this, so they probably built that notch as wide as it is for the possibility of Face ID to put more sensors in there in the future, but it's an upgrade path for these MacBooks. You can inversely think of the notch as just more screen on the left and right side of where the camera is, and hides the taskbar. If you're watching a movie, it's not going to hide your movie. It's still going to be cropped. So where there would be a taskbar or a menu bar, it would just be a black bar on top. So whatever, I'm not that big concerned about it. One last final thing. We have Facebook Connect coming up next week. What's the new name going to be? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. I have no idea. That's up to you in the comments. But Jeremy, you have been playing Resident Evil 4.
Yeah. Resident Evil 4 for Quest 2. And I got to say, it's good. And I have a unique perspective on this because I have never not only played Resident Evil 4, I have never played a Resident Evil game.
Okay.
I don't play horror games because, I'm weak of
I'm
weak, I'm meek, and I am afraid of life, and I don't need a horror game to increase my anxiety levels. That said, I thought it'd be a great idea to play it in VR. No, it is at times a scary experience. And if I were you, if you're like me, you have two difficulty settings, and I would encourage you to put it on the easy mode. First of all, it is a long game. It is a long game by all accounts, and I have not finished it. But it is a 15-hour game experience. So you're going to be in there a while. I don't know if you need to be on hard mode. You do you. But for me, easy mode had just plenty of challenge, and it allowed me to progress a little faster. The game itself is 16 years old. So you're going to be getting 16-year-old graphics, at least 3D models. And you're going to be getting, sort of an antiquated design from some respects. I think probably a lot of people have played this game. They know what they're getting into. I just want to let people know who haven't, like myself, that you can expect some inventory management and things that feel a little outdated. There's some minor crafting involved, which is, you have to combine things in order to clear out your inventory space and things like that. The voice acting in this game is really cheesy. Like, get ready for some just lame voice acting and sound effects that are really, really redundant. All that said, like the texturing redux is great. Like, they have remade almost every texture in the game. It looks solid, and the gameplay itself, wherever it made sense to incorporate some new VR mechanic, feels seamless. Like, you are, in some cases using latches to open doors. You are solving puzzles by pressing buttons or rotating things. You have the option there. The game is loaded with options for comfort level. So if you want to have teleportation, you can. If you want to do free locomotion, you can. Free turning, you can. I would never recommend that, but some people can handle it. I can't. So snap turning is the default. But the free locomotion feels great. And you can drive a boat, and there's different comfort levels for that. And when you come to these, like when you get to your first boat ride, the game will stop and say, what comfort level do you want? It's almost like it feels like a made for VR game. You can switch weapons by these 2 different modes. You can use a thumbstick in order to toggle between what you're holding, or you can do body location based things. So you can grab your 2-handed weapon over your arm and your knife over here and grenades here, and you reach out for your pistol, and there's a reloading mechanic, very simple, a lot like some of the Onward and other games like that, not as complicated, but simplified manual reloads. So you're throwing a clip in, you're cocking the gun, and then it's ready to go, which adds to a lot of the tension when you are being faced by a horde of zombies. I give the game a real big thumbs up. It feels like a professional version, and I mean no disrespect to Dr. Beef. I love his remakes of Doom 3 and Half-Life and Quake 2, but like they do feel like fan made games that would need smoothing in order to release commercially. This feels like it's that with that veneer of finished smoothness to the experience, the UI, the menus, the game itself. It doesn't just feel like they've got it working in VR. It really feels like VR first. They did a great conversion, and I'm only 4 or 5 hours into it. I'm looking forward to going back to it. Good game.
Awesome. Well, you did say it's a 16-year-old game, and much like Doom 3, is almost older than that, I want to say even. But it's proven that conversions, whether it's done by fans or done professionally with lots of beta testing and paid for here by Oculus, is a viable path to bring new content with old content, a new experience with old content for VR users.
Exactly.
And I want to see more of this. I do want to see the Lone Echoes and full original games and games like Half-Life Alyx, but those are fiscally maybe much more difficult. I don't know how much a Lone Echo 2 versus a Resident Evil 4 port costs, but I gotta imagine the port is more affordable. And there's a huge catalog of third-person and first-person games I'd love to see ported over. So do more of this, Oculus.
100%.
I want a Mass Effect VR port. That's what I want. The Mass Effect trilogy.
I will say I'm not sure why this is Quest 2 only, because the graphics don't look like it requires that. I have a feeling that a lot of this game would run fine on Quest 1, just not consistently. And so I know like Doom 3, for example, was a game that ran at higher frame rate on Quest 2, but it was also, they got it running on Quest 1, and you had to have some concessions and reduce some features. But I'm surprised that they didn't do that for this one too. Maybe that will come in the future. I have no idea, but I think that you'll probably be seeing that question asked once this game comes out.
Yeah. All right. And that does it for the show this week. Let me look at the schedule. Are we recording? Yeah, we are recording after Facebook Connect next week. So that's going to be the big thing to talk about. I don't have any predictions. My predictions, no new hardware, maybe glimpses of hardware, but no actual products announced. And I hope to see lots of software updates, improvements, because I want the Quest 2 to have a nice long life as they promised.
Sure.
I want to hear people's Halloween costume ideas, because that is sneaking up on us real quick.
Next week would be a little too late to hear those ideas, but I want to see. I want to see. Yeah, get inspired. Get in the spirit. And if you have a laser cutter, I recommend checking out Jen Schachter's laser cut diorama project of her haunted house miniature, which is on both the Go Forge catalog and also on her Etsy. We're actually doing a live stream on Thursday for listening to this with her chatting about the making of that project if you have questions and are into laser cutting design. And that does it. Again, I'll play a outro after we sign off, but thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Kishore. Good to see you both, and hope to see you both next week, and hope to see you all out there next week as well. Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
Bastard.
All right. There's one existential question that's been on my mind for decades. Mm-hmm. And it's really one that I think most people have asked, and it's really, why do horses only have one toe?
Whoa.
Why would they have developed one out of that? Like, evolution doesn't be like, yeah, I don't like that toe. Get that toe out of here.
That's the way God wanted it.
tested.